Hello everyone, it's Gigabeef here, and today we're looking at the best level 2 trader weapons, starting with Prapor. So he has a lot of AKs. These ones, I actually don't really think there's that much point of buying them over the basic AKS-74Us on level 1. And this is because they're actually very similar in terms of performance, just with lower ergonomics. I've built two equivalent level 2 trader style builds with DTK muzzles and that kind of thing, and you can see that the difference in the performance of the recoil is almost negligible. Now that the 74U has its own railed cover, like the equivalent to the Bastion called the Pilgrim, I don't really see any reason to use these longer versions of the AK anymore. The beauty of the 545 platform in general is the availability of ammunition in raid. You can buy some of this stuff on the flea, but the best that you can get now is PP. You used to be able to buy BP on the flea market, but since this got buffed to 45 pen, this has since been banned. You were never able to buy BT, and you still can't, but can go and buy a box of BT on Prapor 2, but this tends to be pretty expensive. 2 shonkers often costs about 40k, and given that you only get 30 bullets, that's well over 1,000 per round. Now the AKM is okay, but I think it has a lot of recoil for what it is. It's slightly hard to control on full auto, and given the lack of ammunition for this as well, I think you're probably better off sticking with 545. The best time to use the AKM is when you manage to find some PS or T45 in raid. One interesting thing is that you can still buy 7.62 PP from the flea, which is extremely powerful, so if you really want to cut through class 4 armor like butter, then you can go and buy that. But again, it tends to be a very expensive round, and at this stage in the wipe, it's probably not worth it. Prapor also sells the Kedda B at this level. This is something that is an acquired taste, but some people really like it just due to its low recoil and head tapping potential. It's very cheap and requires no mods, so it's an easy pick up and go kind of gun. Next, we're going to move over to Skier. Now Skier has a relatively limited selection of weapons, the first one being the MCX. You can often get the MCX for about 80k, GPXs tend to be about 30, the same with 1G phones, and these are around 10 each. But the issue with the MCX again is the ammunition. The best that you can buy is VMAX, which only has 20 penetration, and so that's a little bit rough. And the other ones are locked off on the flea market, primarily being BCP and CBJ. You can buy these from other players, BCP FMJ being 60 damage and 30 pen for about 750, M62 Tracer being in the middle with 54 damage and 36 pen, which is pretty good, but we're getting to near 1,000 per bullet here again, and CBJ being the best performance at 58 damage and 43 pen, which is well over $1,000 per bullet. From the other options that he sells these SAG AKs as well, both the long and the short version, which aren't too bad. Interestingly, the short version comes with a PWS CQB muzzle, which you can't buy until Skier level 3. They're relatively cheap on the flea, but if you did want to pick one up and they're not available there, then maybe this is an option. I'm not so keen on these semi-auto 545s when you can get such good recoil out of the 74Us on Prapor. The same goes with the STM. For 45k, this is semi-auto in 9mm, and you can buy complete laser beams, which we'll see in a moment, for 9mm, so I think that the semi-auto meta for this is a very niche use case. The last weapon that Skier has is the RFB. I actually think the RFB is pretty good. This only costs 2 gas analyzers, which are really cheap. That tends to make it cost about 30,000 rubles, which is a complete bargain for this weapon. At this point in the trader progression, you can only buy TCWSP, but with 87 damage and 30 pen, it's honestly not that bad. You could also go and buy BCP FMJ from the flea market with 35 pen, which is a little bit better against PMCs, but you get FMJ unlocked from Jaeger 3 relatively shortly after anyways. Over to Peacekeeper. On Peacekeeper 2, he's got some interesting weapons. He does sell the M4 in its kind of base configuration, but I don't really see the point of using this over something like the G36C. The same thing goes for the Mark 16 for the Scar, because all of these have got very similar recoil. You look at the recoil for the M4, it is at 84, the Scar is at 85, and the G36 is 79. And the G36 has the best ergo out of all of these, and so if you want to go and run 556, I think the G36C is the best one. I went into offline to test the Scar and the G36C using the same mods, i.e. the Monster Suppressor and an RVG foregrip, and as you can see, the G36C doesn't suffer from having high RPM anymore, which is pretty cool, and it's the cheapest gun out of all three by quite a long way. The M1A barter that Peacekeeper has for 10 USBs is offered about 50k, but at this point I don't think there's really any use going for this. You may as well just get the RFB from Skier. The last 5 are all SMGs, which in the new recoil model are very low recoil indeed. The MPX Silenced and the MP5SD are practically the same when it comes to testing. You can see they have a very little jump, and they both have about the same height for their overall recoil. The MPX clearly has a much greater scope for modding, whereas the MP5SD is pretty much stuck as is. Although it seems to have higher ergonomics and a better ADS speed as standard, you can probably get this faster with the MPX if you want to spend the money on it. The MP5SD is extremely easy to just pick up and run, although 9mm is your max at Peacekeeper 2 until you get to Peacekeeper 3, where you can buy AP 6.3. P90 Barter is not bad either, this only costs 60k, although the ammo is really limited for this as well. That said, the SS197 SR bullet outperforms PST by quite a significant margin with 62 damage and 25 pen, making it much more akin to .45 FMJ. The P90's extreme rate of fire does make the initial burst slightly harder to control, but it ends up getting to about the same point, and with a 50 round mag, this is actually relatively viable. The P90 SBR Barter comes with a rail already, so it's also very easy just to stick on an optic like a red dot. The fact that SS197 has 25 penetration is quite important now because it will go through all of the Class 2 soft armor due to the armor rework, and it will perform relatively well against the Class 3 soft armor as well in case you come up against somebody with a slightly better version. As I said, this is the same penetration as the .45 match FMJ that is used in the UMP, which you can also buy and is one of the cheapest guns that Peacekeeper sells that isn't a pistol. The rate of fire is relatively low on this, and I would say the recoil is not really that nice with quite a lot of horizontal, but again, it's easy to mod and it's very cheap to pick up and run. Match FMJ does 72 damage as well, so this is very, very powerful. Alright, moving on to Mechanic, I don't think that a lot of his weapons here are actually really worthwhile. We can already buy the M4 either on Peacekeeper or using the Peacekeeper 1 Barter, which is typically cheaper than this. The OPSKS is okay if you want to use it, but this tends to cost about 45,000 rubles, so you may be able to just mod yourself a better one from Jaeger. The M4A1 SOP mod Barter is still extremely useful. 2 pro kill medals only costs about 150k at the moment, so this could be a good way to source Elcan scopes, which is not a bad thing given that these cost a lot at the moment. If we go and check on the flea market, they tend to be about 73k, so that's like half of the price of the weapon. A lot of these guns we've seen before, either the 74N on Prapor or the Scar on Peacekeeper, and as I said, I don't think these are really worthwhile. P90 for 6 GP coins could be good. This costs about 150k and comes with a really nice sight and also a suppressor, so if you are looking to use the P90, this might actually be cheaper than building it yourself. Finally, over on Jaeger, let's go and have a look at his weapons. He has a couple here. He has the Vepr Hunter, firstly, which I just don't think is worth using. You may as well just buy the RFB. Before you get to Jaeger 3, you can only have 5 round mags on the Hunter, which is very, very limiting. He sells 3 types of shotgun here directly, MP155, MP153, and the Jaeger 12. The MP155 and the 153 are very similar. I do prefer the 153. I went and tested it, and the return to center time does seem to be still quicker on the 153 versus the 155. The benefits of the 155 primarily come from modding it out with all of the parts, but you can't get access to those until Jaeger 3, so until then, I'd probably still stick with the 153. If you really want magazine-loaded shotguns instead, you could go for the Jaeger 12 instead, but with 5 rounders at most at this point, I still think that the 153 is a little bit superior to that. I also really love the target ring that comes with the 153. For me, this makes it much easier to shoot, especially if you're using buckshot or a multi-pellet round like Piranha. Piranha, which is basically like Baby Flechette, has moved down onto Jaeger 2 and is extremely cheap. It doesn't have the best pen with only 24, and I'm seeing lots of inconsistent results, people saying that sometimes it one-taps, sometimes you just simply can't get a kill with it. This is probably more down to the armor rework rather than the cartridge itself. Finally, if you're looking for a nice bolty, he still has the M700 Barter for a Deadly Slob beard oil. This is about 35k to 30k-ish on the flea market, depending, and this could be a nice one to pick up, especially if you have some bullets spare from a higher tier like M80 or M62. So the weapons that I'm tending towards at the moment is the 545 AK-74U style guns from Prapor 1, because I think these are outperforming the longer versions, and with the Pilgrim Rail, they're very easy to mod. You can find the ammo in Raid plentifully and buy it on the fleet if you need to. I've bought my fair share of PS and PP off the fleet already. If you're USEC and you have a lot of your 855 ammo left over because you didn't use it in the early wipe, I've been using the G36C a lot from Peacekeeper. This worked really well last wipe, and with the recoil rework, it's still working a treat now and is one of the cheapest guns you can get from him, as well as being easy to mod. I've been supplementing this with 55A1 and 56A1 that I find in Raid, but finding 556 in Raid is a lot harder than the 545s. A couple of honorable mentions if you wanted to look to do something a little bit different is 366 APM, which is on the flea market. This is turbo pricey. It's about 3,000 to 4,000 rubles per bullet, but obviously it hits like a truck, and with the armor rework, you'll be one-tapping a lot of people if you hit them through the soft armor. This is especially good for parts of Tarkov Shooter, the close range version in particular, and it's also amazing in the 209, but as I said, firing a 4k per bullet round is not really that ideal in the early wipe. Although the MP7 still has issues with magazines, you can buy the MP7 itself from the flea and JSP relatively cheaply too. No one's really buying JSP, but with 32 pen, it's only 2 penetration off 545 PP, which is really not that bad. Another one to mention is the VSS from the flea market with SP5, because you can buy SP5 from Prapor too. With 71 damage and 28 pen, this is pretty powerful given the VSS's RPM of 900, although the magazines are really expensive if you want 20s. You could potentially use the 9A91 or the VSK, the two new guns in this caliber, however they have quite high recoil in comparison, like 86 to 90 rather than 50, so they're a lot harder to control, but they are maybe an option. The SVD, while expensive because of Punisher Part 6, is usable with T46 ammo, and you can buy both of these off the flea. LPS is a lot of money, but T46 is typically a little bit cheaper, and you could even use FMJ if you wanted to. The thing about T46 is with 41 pen, it's basically going to go through every single piece of armor in the game that you're going to meet at the moment, whereas FMJ with 33 pen is just not quite as powerful. Although with the way that some of the armor seems to be working at the moment, I'm not 100% sure whether I trust 41 pen either. The final one, which is a bit of a rogue choice, is the Ash 12 and PS12 ammo. PS12 is purchasable on Prapor at level 2 and deals 115 damage with 28 penetration. While 28 pen is not that good, 115 damage is obviously insane, and it should pen through both class 2 and class 3 soft armor, so unless you specifically hit a plate, you might kill your opponent in one hit if you hit them anywhere in the center of mass. The Ash 12 is relatively cheap on the flea too, only costing 63k, which is basically the price that it sells to mechanic for, because until people get PS12B, no one tends to use it. And you have to buy the mags for it off the flea as well. So next up, if you want to improve your efficiency in Raid, go and check out my new and updated hotkeys guide with all of the big brain stuff that I can think of for patch 14. Otherwise, as usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.